Hi everyone, the partial prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when Jesus comes, we will see fully. Okay, so today I called my prophecy update cluster bombs falling on Israel, tornadoes, flooding, and fires in the United States. Pre-tribbers need to repent. Okay, I guess that's kind of a long title. I actually came up with this title a couple weeks ago when cluster bombs were actually falling on Israel. And but my prophecy update is like covering the time frame of like the last video was around the time of the start of the war with Iran. And then now today is April 30th. And so kind of the time frame in between those two dates. And so in that time frame was when we saw cluster bombs falling on Israel from Iran. But all through this war, we saw Iran, was definitely sending missiles over to Israel. And then there's just been crazy weather stuff going on in the United States too, at the same time. And so these people so pre-tribbers would be people that believe in a rapture before a tribulation period. They don't recognize that we're in tribulation right now. I do believe that God's people are saved from wrath, from God's God's ultimate wrath on the unbelieving. But we do go through tribulation. And so let's look at what I wrote here. So pre-tribulation rapture teaching is a sham. First of all, it's anti-Semitic, okay? Because part of the teaching about the pre-tribulation rapture is that they believe that Christians are going to be taken off of the earth, and then there's going to be this is the teaching, there's going to be they believe there's going to be a 7-year time frame where God turns his attention back onto the Jewish people like he hasn't been paying attention to them up to this point. So that I guess he could whip them into shape so they could find their Messiah. And so it's so it's anti-Semitic. I did a video on it, a Left Behind. It's it starts with the title Left Behind, where I go into kind of more detail. But here's what I wrote here. I said, we need to consider all the suffering the Jewish people and others in Israel are going through in this war with Iran. And plus then also during this war, then Hezbollah kind of picked up again in Lebanon too. And then they were sending missiles to Israel and stuff like that. And so, so people that don't recognize that the Jewish people have been going through suffering are really naive about what's going on in Israel. But I did say you have to do some extra work to find information on what the people in Israel are going through. Because for example, like the news is very anti-Semitic. And so they actually, you don't find a lot of interviews with people in Israel on local media in the United States. You have to kind of find a channel that is pro-Israel to hear some of their stories. And because the other, a week ago on the news, the story that I heard was they were interviewing the people in Lebanon to talk about what they were going through. So we don't hear the stories about the suffering in Israel. And so I wrote, here's a glimpse. Okay, they said in the kind of the first 4 weeks of war, they had over 93 times running to the bomb shelters. Okay, and so what happens is they get a warning, an alarm on their phone, and they have to run to the bomb shelter. And so it makes it hard to sleep. It makes it hard to get anything done. And so that is just a small little glimpse of the suffering they've been going through with this war in Iran. Okay, and the pre-tribulation rapture is really not supported by the Bible and current events, okay? Because there's been persecution of Christians and Jews around the world. We're seeing Matthew 24 in living color, okay? That really shows like we're in tribulation. And then I wrote, Iran attacking Israel in war, causing deaths, injuries, and damage in Israel, post-traumatic stress, lost power in Tel Aviv, etc. And then in the U.S., so some of the stuff that we've seen during this time frame is flooding in Hawaii, like really bad flooding. There was a heat dome in the Southwest. So it was really hot in the Southwest of America. And that was kind of keeping the rain to keep coming down in Hawaii, because there was this system that was sort of stuck. And so it was repeated rain in Hawaii causing all this flooding. And then we've seen fires, and so this was going on a while ago, was fires and tornadoes and hail and stuff like that. But then this past week too, it's just been like we've had like fires going on in one part of the country while tornadoes are going on in other parts of the country. And with the tornadoes and the storms, really bad hail, and then other stuff we're going on right now in the country is the high grocery bills, and the high gas prices, where the high grocery bills are kind of connected to the high gas prices, but also Trump's crazy tariff stuff. We had Trump going after the food stamps and government aid, which has been difficult for people. And then we've had nonstop shootings, mass shootings, various places, etc. and etc. I mean, there's like, it's almost impossible to kind of make a comprehensive list and listing everything. So ask yourself if you think we're living out Matthew 24 right now. A couple of verses that I wanted to talk about right here is that, so in Daniel 7, Daniel's talking about the fourth beast, and he said he will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the highest one. Okay. And so I believe we're definitely in that time frame right now. I believe Trump is the fourth beast, and God's people are definitely getting worn down. They're definitely worn down in Israel. They're worn down in America. That's the time frame that we're in. And then in Revelation 7:14, John writes, and he said to me, these are the ones who come out of the great tribulation, and they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And so if you understand that tribulation is about purifying us, about making us ready for the Messiah, then you could see why we need to go through tribulation. Okay, like people don't have a good theology of God's sanctification process for the believer. Okay, and so they don't understand the purpose of tribulation. And so it's kind of an American mindset of thinking, that God doesn't want us to suffer. The Bible actually talks about us finishing the sufferings of the Messiah. Anyways, and then John 16:33, it says, in the world you have tribulation, but take courage, I have overcome the world. Okay. Okay, so then I found this map, and this is actually from February 19th. It's not really, it's more the time frame from the previous video. but I really liked this map because it showed just like how crazy the weather's been here. Okay. So like the middle of the country was having a red flag warning, and then the west was having an avalanche warning, and the north, let's see, northwest, then you see the winter storm warning in the pink there, and then in the purple the winter weather advisory, and then like in Illinois, Indiana, they were having a tornado watch, and then more toward the east they were having a flood watch. So just crazy stuff going on all at the same time in the country. Okay. So that was on February 19th. And I wrote the second greater Exodus because if you understand okay, so God had his original Exodus, and you can read about it in the book of Exodus, in the Torah, the first 5 books. And so that was when Israel was in Egypt, and God brought them 10 plagues. Okay. Well, we're in the second greater Exodus. And so instead of God's people just being in one country, God's people are kind of spread out throughout the world. And God's plagues are really covering the world. Okay, there's more than just 10 plagues. It's like a ton of stuff. And it's actually kind of been going on for a while. But it's getting worse and worse the closer we get to Jesus's return. So I really like this map. And then I also think this map is a good illustration of Genesis 8:22, and I highlighted the 8:22 because I think Trump is the 8th king, and then 22 connects to 8th because it's the 8th day of the holidays on the Jewish calendar. Okay, so it's like 2 8s being listed there. And it says, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. So we would see that at various times in the country where some people would be cold on one side and the other people would be really hot. And so definitely like summer and winter, and like this winter season has been is like, I live in Colorado, so it's been more of like a summer than a winter. But it'd be interesting because all of a sudden we'd have these warm days, and then boom, all of a sudden it'd be a cold day like winter. And my plants in the yard just don't know what to do because the weather's been back and forth all winter. So I definitely think we're in the last days. Okay, and so then the thing that I wrote in red here, because it says while the earth remains, what I think that's referring to is the beast of the earth. Okay, and that's from Revelation 13, and I believe Trump is the beast of the earth. Okay, and so while he's still around, we're gonna see these crazy dual things going on: seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, all at the same time. And because we're under judgment. So that's what I believe. And then, okay, so this is from 417. Okay. And it said a tornado outbreak last Friday produced more than 70 confirmed tornadoes, including 2 EF3s in Wisconsin. Several twisters also swept across Illinois, Minnesota, and Missouri, leaving a trail of damage. Okay, and so this chart actually says 75 confirmed tornadoes on Friday, April 17th. Okay, and so 2 EF3s, 6 EF2s, 46 EF1s, 17 EFOs, for the EF unknown. And you could see this chart here of the Midwest. And so Minnesota, Wisconsin, I mean, they were kind of spread out. Oklahoma, Missouri, Illinois. So just crazy. And then this is from 420. They wrote, Iowa and Wisconsin have already had more tornado warnings this year than all of 2025. And so the numbers here are the tornado warnings, okay? I guess for this year, I'm assuming as of April 20th. So, so what's different this year than last year? And what I think is because we're getting very near the return of Jesus, okay? And so the birth pangs are speeding up. But plus, I think, we're judgment over the stuff that Trump's doing, like in the Middle East and stuff too. Like, to me, it kind of gets hard to kind of sort it out, like separate it out. But I think it kind of goes hand in hand, like, God's allowed Trump to come to power so that he'd do all these crazy things and that we'd be under judgment, because God is using that to prepare us for the coming of the Messiah. He's using Trump to wear us out, get us ready, and and it's part of our purification and sanctification process. Okay, so this is on 422. 420 also, I should say, not 2. This is a look at where all the tornadoes have occurred in Wisconsin so far this year. More than half have been in the southeastern corner of the state. The strongest have been farther north. Okay, so this is the Wisconsin state tornado count. So just practically covers the whole state. It's just crazy. Well, there's a little number after it says through April 20th, and then it's got in parentheses it says 24. So I wonder if that means there's 24. The count is actually 24 tornadoes. I'm thinking that's probably true. So, okay, and so then on 422, there was a wildfire PDS, which is a particularly dangerous situation. Okay, so let me read this article. For the first time ever in southern Colorado, a particularly dangerous situation has been declared for fire danger. For the first time, the National Weather Service office in Pueblo has issued a particularly dangerous situation for fire weather in southern Colorado. That designation means fire weather conditions are about as extreme as they can get. Goodness gracious, in the outlined areas. And see the big map of red? So that's the PDS area. So just crazy. And then on 424, there was 29 tornadoes in 7 days. Okay, the National Weather Service and the Storm Prediction Center, let's see. Okay, logs severe weather reports as they happen, including those about tornadoes. The map plots the number and locations of preliminary tornado reports during the last 7 days. Okay. And so, so where recent tornadoes have been reported, at least 29 tornadoes have been reported in the last 7 days in the contiguous United States. The most recent was in Pittsburgh County, Oklahoma on April 24th. So just a lot of tornadoes in the middle, and then I guess like 3 in California. Anyways, so then on 424, this is the wildfires, like a picture of the wildfires. Wildfires. Okay, this map is a look as of Friday morning of the ongoing wildfire situation across the southeast. So this is the, this was crazy that, Florida and Georgia just burst into flames. I mean, just fires everywhere. You can see an area from northern portions of the Florida Peninsula through southeast Georgia with a higher concentration of wildfires. The worsening drought plays a big factor in fueling the wildfires. Exceptional drought conditions, which is the highest tier on the drought monitor, stretches from Statesboro, Georgia, southwest through Valdosta and into eastern portions of the Florida Panhandle, including Tallahassee and areas just west of Jacksonville and Gainesville. So yeah, that is a lot of wildfires going on. And then this was the California wildfires map from April 25th. The most recent fires is the carbon fire, which started on April 25th. Actually, I just had a thought because yeah, because wasn't the shooter's name Carbon or something like that, or something to do with, I think there might be a connection with that. Okay. It is 71% contained and has burned 209 acres so far. Anyways, so all the X's are all the different fires. So in the country that were going on that particular moment. So I'm going to, while we're here, I'm going to look up that guy, the shooter's name. Because I was thinking it had something to do with, let's see, shooter. Okay. Cole Allen. Okay, I guess that's why I was thinking. Okay, so his first name is Cole, and I was thinking of, like, coal that you mine. So it's interesting because the shooting happened on April 25th, and then it's interesting that California was having this carbon fire going on at the same time. So definitely interesting. Then this is wildfires from 427. So see all the orange flames all across the country. So, okay. And then on Monday, April 27th, Oklahoma and Texas tornadoes. Okay, so tornado devastates Texas town on 6 straight day of severe storms. So they were getting hammered for 6 days in a row. Okay. Several people are injured after a tornado in Mineral Wells, Texas, flattened a portion of the town Tuesday night, the 6th day of a severe storm outbreak that has terrorized the Midwest and South. The tornado ripped through Mineral Wells, also 10 miles west of Dallas, around 5 p.m. Tuesday evening, city officials said. 5 people went to the hospital due to their injuries, including 2 who were taken by ambulance. The fire chief said at a news conference Wednesday. Several people were also treated for minor injuries on the scene, but refused transport. So on Monday, April 27th, I wrote Oklahoma and Texas tornadoes were now moving east, but apparently they were still getting hit in Texas on the 6th day, and they were also getting baseball sized hail too. And winds and various things like that. Okay, so one thought that I had, besides birth pangs related to all this weather events, so during this time frame, so on April 22nd, which I think was it was the day before the 6-day time frame of the tornadoes in Texas and Oklahoma, the Jewish people, their reading for the day was Leviticus 18. Okay, and we read do not defile yourself by any of these things. So up to this point in the reading, God listed a bunch of things that he doesn't like. Okay, and he said, do not defile yourselves by any of these things. For by all these the nations which I am casting out before you have become defiled. For the land has become defiled, therefore I have brought its punishment upon it. So the land has spewed out its inhabitants. But as for you, you are to keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not do any of these abominations, neither the native nor the alien who sojourns among you, so that the land will not spew you out, should you defile it, as it has spewed out the nation which has been before you. So in the first Exodus, before Israel was able to go into the land, because of the sins of the people that were living in the land at the time, God talks about the land spewing them out before Israel was able to possess the land. I mean, Israel actually had some wars too with the people of the land to get rid of them. And God was like, get rid of them, don't leave them behind, and otherwise they'll become a thorn in your side. Because he didn't want Israel to be influenced by them and to adopt their pagan practices. Okay, God wanted Israel to obey God's laws. And so that was what happened in the first Exodus. And so I believe we're seeing a repeat now that, God's trying to get the land ready for his people. And so, and also because of the sins of the people, the land is spewing them out. So because this, we've really kind of lost it because we've kind of gotten, acclimated, I guess, to, or sin has become kind of normalized. Like everyone just kind of, we've been a frog in a pot of boiling water where you slowly boil the water. And so they've slowly been adding the sins, so that, just weird, evil things have just become normal to us. Okay. But God is holy and he wants us to be holy like him, like he is holy. So that could be an explanation for, these tornadoes, this crazy weather. So what's the answer? So repent, and pray to God. Okay. And so, like I said, we're in the second greater Exodus. Also, we're suffering birth pangs and purification. I mean, it all kind of rolls together into one. Okay. And then 1 Thessalonians 5:3 says, so this also could be going on too. It says, while they are saying peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly like labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape. So right now in April, let's see. So for March, the month of March, we were at war with Iran. And then Trump, started this ceasefire with Iran on 4/7, and then it was just going to be for 2 weeks, and then now it's been extended indefinitely. And then they started this ceasefire with Lebanon on 4/16. Okay, so we got these, and I put ceasefire in quotes, okay, because they don't do that great of a job of ceasing the fire, okay. Israel's enemies still will break the ceasefire with very excuses as to why they do it. And then Israel will step up to defend themselves, and then Israel gets accused of breaking the ceasefire. So it's not a good situation. but God said while they're staying in peace and safety, then there'd be destruction, like labor pains. Okay. Anyways, so I wanted to make a list of Trump's ceasefires. And so these would be in his second term. Okay. I have different charts in my earlier videos about things that went on in his first term. But so in 2025, on 6/23 and 24, there was a ceasefire that Trump actually forced on Israel and Iran. Like, with all these ceasefires, Israel's never able to finish what they're trying to accomplish. Okay. And these ceasefires get forced on Israel that really aren't that good for Israel. And many times it's the American presidents that are forcing these ceasefires, because Biden did this too. So I'm wondering, that verse that talks about the restrainer, it's like, well, like one time I read it and I thought, the restrainer could be the American presidents who are restraining Israel from fighting their wars as they need to fight them to protect themselves. So that was one thought that I had about the restrainer. On 7/18 last year, Israel was forced to have a ceasefire with Syria. Now, this was bad because Israel was actually fighting in Syria because I think it was Turkey, and I don't remember who else was involved. Like the Syrians too were probably involved. They were going after the Kurds, and so Israel was trying to help the Kurds, the Kurdish people in Syria. But then they were forced to have the ceasefire, and so I don't know what it's been like for the Kurds since then. So I mean, it's probably not. They're probably majorly being persecuted or whatever. I mean, I know that they were being forced to join the Syrian army too, at the time. So that's that ceasefire. And then on 9/29 was when, so Trump and Netanyahu actually announced this ceasefire. I think it's the 20-point plan. But I'm not really sure. Because all those points kind of run in my brain. But they announced this ceasefire with Hamas, and it's really kind of like delusional thinking that like it really comes out of Trump's board of peace and stuff like that comes out of this ceasefire idea with Hamas, and it's delusional to think that Hamas is going to lay down their weapons and stop being terrorist. And so Trump and Netanyahu and other people connected to them, since they like money and, living posh lifestyles, they think that if you offer a posh lifestyle to Hamas, that they will put their guns down and live in the high rises that Trump wants to build on Gaza. It's just delusional thinking. So that was 9/29. And it actually, this was a terrible ceasefire with Israel because they were making really good progress in Gaza, but then they were forced to stop what they were doing, move backwards. And so they lost the ground that they gained during war. That Israeli lives were sacrificed, in the war to try to, deal with Hamas. And then it was like, those lives didn't account for anything because they made them backtrack, move backwards. I mean, just really almost like starting over or whatever. And then just a lot of Palestinian terrorists were released from prison. I mean, Israel did get, so on 10/13, I think was the date. They were able to get their hostages back and the dead bodies back under the ceasefire, but it was at a great cost. Okay, and a lot of it had to do with the pressure that Netanyahu was under by hostage families that wanted their family members back. So anyways, there's a lot more we could say about that, but I won't do that right now. So it was announced in 929. On 1010 was when it started. 1013 was when the hostages were released. Then on 4/7, okay, so then like I said, on 4/7 was the 2-week ceasefire with Iran. On 4/16 is Lebanon ceasefire. Okay, so it was funny when I was doing this chart, I thought there would be like 3 main ones. Because you know how 3 seems to be a big number in scriptures. And and then the Antichrist, his number is 666, so I thought there'd be 3 ceasefires that, would kind of be the 666 fulfillment. And then Peter like denies Jesus 3 times. That's why I was looking for 3. But then when I listed it out, it's like, well, there's actually like 5. And so then I'm like, well, actually, you could count the one that Trump did with Biden before he even got into office. And so they, I guess they announced that on January 15th, and then it went into effect on January 19th, which, by the way, is a hidden 9/11 number. And so that would actually make Trump's ceasefires in his second term 6 ceasefires, which, that could be the fulfillment. It's the, 6 ceasefires that connect to the beast of the earth, 666. Okay, so then, connected to his ceasefires, I wrote, okay, so Daniel 9:26, it says, after the 62 weeks, the anointed one will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. And its end will come with the flood, even to the end there will be war, desolations are determined. Okay, so in the very end, there will be, up to the very end, there will be war. Okay, so is this war with Iran the last war before Messiah comes? Like, okay, so Messiah's, there's going to be some wars after Messiah comes that Jesus is going to fight with God's enemies. Okay, but I'm really wondering if this war that we're in right now is like the last one before Messiah comes. Okay, that is actually my belief that it is. Okay, and because we read in Daniel 9 that the anointed one will be cut off. Well, so Israel, okay, so going back to these ceasefires, Israel's been cut off. They're not allowed to fight with their enemies in Syria, their enemies in Gaza, their enemies in Lebanon, their biggest enemy, Iran. Okay, they've been cut off with these ceasefires. Okay, Trump is saying, stop, Israel, you're not allowed to fight anymore because we got these wonderful ceasefires going on, quote unquote. And so they've been cut off. Okay. And then it says, the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city of the sanctuary. So the prince who is to come is connected to the goat, or connected to Greece. This is elsewhere in Daniel. It's connected to Greece, who Greece is the goat, and the goat comes and fights the ram. Okay. So I think what the deal is that, so Israel got cut off, okay, with these ceasefires, and then God's going to bring judgment on Trump for these ceasefires by bringing the left back. Okay, the left is the goat, and Trump is the ram with the 2 horns, is Trump and Netanyahu. Okay, so that's what I believe about that it's the civil war, it's the coming civil war. And I'll show you some other verses too that show you that that's what's coming. Okay, the civil war in America. I don't know if there's going to be a civil war in Israel, although the setup really looks similar in Israel as it does in America. Okay. And then in Daniel 12:7, it says, okay, I heard the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river as he raised his right hand and his left toward heaven and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. And as soon as they finish shattering the power of the holy people, all these events will be completed. So, is Israel's power shattered with these ceasefires? Is my question. Because then it says, if so, if Israel's power is shattered, all these events will be completed. Then God says, that's it. Like Jesus, I'm sending Jesus. So that's what I think is going on. And what's interesting is, so these waters, this river, there's a guy on the right hand and on the right bank, and there's a guy on the left bank of this river. And you see that picture all throughout scripture of someone on the right and someone on the left. But then with this current thing going on right now, I thought of another fulfillment because I thought it was just a picture of like the Civil War. You got someone on the right and someone on the left. And then Jesus is kind of in the middle but above the waters. But then with this, so the current thing that's going on right now is that, so all throughout the war, Iran was trying to block the Strait of Hormuz. And then you had Trump jumped in there and said, well, if you're going to block it, I'm going to block it. And so I'm wondering if these two people on the two different banks are a picture of Iran on their side blocking the Strait of Hormuz, and then Trump on his side blocking the Strait of Hormuz. And so then, that would be another picture that shows us that we're, like near the completion of events. Okay. And the time and half time, I came up with 3.5 months from Trump's on January 20th of this year, which would be the 1-year anniversary of Trump's inauguration. If you take that date and bring it to like May 4th or May 5th, which are the big dates I'm looking at right now, you get 3.5 months. So that's what I'm wondering, if that connects to the times and half the time. And then, so what I'm believing is that, so for the longest time, I've been kind of looking at these two end time signs. I put in Jesus's quote about it is finished. Okay. Because what I'm wondering is, I think it's finished because, like, just like I talked about on the last slide, Israel's been cut off. Their power's been shattered. So that's the first sign. The second sign is the Daniel 7 thing, where the beast will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the highest one. Okay. So we're definitely have seen that fulfilled. Okay. So that's why I'm thinking we're at the end. Okay. Because these two signs have been fulfilled. Okay. And then what's interesting too is that this Daniel 7 verse also lists that same time frame, time, and half a time. And there's a second fulfillment of time, times, and half a time where, okay, so time would be Obama's term, times would be, no, wait a minute, I did that wrong. So time would be Trump's first term, times would be Obama's term added to, Biden. So Obama and Biden. And then the half a time would be the return of Trump. And where it's the dividing of time. Okay, so God's using the second term of Trump to bring division. Okay, which basically it's the setup for the Civil War. So that's what's going on with that. But there, like I said, there's another fulfillment where it's 3.5 months from Trump's, inauguration date, January 20th, the 1-year date, the 1-year anniversary to May 4th and 5th. I mean, assuming something happens on May 4th and 5th, I think I'd be really surprised if something doesn't happen, and then I'll have to recalculate everything. Ugh. Okay. And then, so like I said, the Israelis are worn out, the Americans are worn out. The other thing that's going on too is there is an energy crisis going on in the world. So this war that Trump started has just basically caused an energy crisis in the world. Okay. And, partly because the oil wasn't able to get through the Strait of Hormuz, but also because Iran was actually bombing power plants and stuff too, or in the surrounding Arab nations. Okay. And so what's interesting, so then I was reading these verses about the abomination of desolation. So I wrote, when you see the abomination, so in Mark it says, when you see the abomination of desolation standing where it should not be, let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. And then there's other places people are supposed to go. I didn't put all those verses in there. And so I'm wondering if one of the abominations of desolation is both Iran and Trump blocking the Strait of Hormuz. Because this will cause desolation. It would cause, it's going to add to this energy crisis. Okay, that if they keeping the ships from going through the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, and then it was interesting when I was reading these verses. So actually, what's interesting was I was having problems posting the right translation. And so I had to kind of shut everything down. But then it was actually worked out good, because when I went back and looked at it, it's like, oh man, I didn't think about this. Where God says, pray that this abomination of desolation, it says, but pray that it may not happen in the winter. And I'm like, oh yeah, totally. Because if there's an energy crisis in the world, you don't want this happening in the winter time. I mean, this is why things are so dire, is because the southern hemisphere is getting ready to move into their winter. Okay, we're getting ready to move into our summer, but in the United States, in the northern hemisphere, but the southern hemisphere is getting ready to move into their winter, and so they're gonna need energy to heat their houses. Okay. So then God says, for those days will be a time of tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the creation, which God created until now and never will. And then it says, unless the Lord had shortened those days, no life would have been saved. But for the sake of the elect whom he chose, he shortened the days. Okay. So do you see that the world is in a crisis right now? That if God doesn't shorten these days, like, people's lives will be threatened. I mean, food prices, that affects the poor people. Gas prices, but then, like I said, the energy crisis affects heating. So that's what's going on there. Okay, that's that verse. And then I was been working on this chart for a while, and it just didn't turn out as good as I wanted it to. So I was trying to compare, like, what was called the deal of the century that Trump did in January 2020 with, what I call, like, someone else came up with the name of deal of the millennium, for what Trump and Netanyahu said on 9/29 in 2025. So I was trying to compare the two because I thought we would see similar patterns. And I mean, I think we are seeing similar patterns. It's the numbers just don't work out as well as I was hoping. The time frames are a little different. But we're still seeing similar things. I mean, because after the deal of the century was when we saw the COVID pandemic and shutdown, and then the George Floyd riots actually started 120 days after Trump's deal of the century. And I connected those to the lion's den that you find in Daniel. in the book of Daniel. And then in 2020 on August 4th, they had a big explosion in Lebanon, and I felt like we entered into a time frame which I called the fiery furnace, because that terrible explosion happened, and then there was like just a lot of wildfires in America. Okay, and that was 190 days after the deal of the century. Well, with the deal of the millennium, we didn't have anything as bad as COVID, but we did see, like 7 weeks later, they talked about that we were entering into a rough flu season. Okay, but I think measles too needs to be accounted for. I mean, partly because like the crazy people on the right don't want to get their vaccines. You know, so that could definitely be a parallel with the COVID stuff. But we did see a shutdown in the United States. Actually, started 3 days after Trump announced the deal of the millennium. That was the U.S. shutdown on 10/1 for 43 days. Oh, and see, things are being repeated because we're in the third U.S. shutdown right now. And so Department of Homeland Security is not getting paid. And so because I'm thinking we're gonna see a repeat. Okay, so like on January 7th, we saw the Renee Good protests. And I did a side-by-side comparison with the George Floyd protest. And the George Floyd protest started 120 days after the deal of the century. I mean, I use protests and riots kind of like similarly. I mean, the George Floyd, they like with all these things, they might be peaceful protests during the day, but at the cover of dark, they turn into rioting. And the media doesn't really report on the rioting. Okay, their narrative, they like the narrative of the peaceful protests, which is just a conspiracy theory. I mean, it's just not true. And I mean, one of the things about George Floyd is 11 letters, and then Renee Good is 9 letters. So you see that 9/11 there. And the Renee Good protest started 120 days after Charlie Kirk's assassination. Okay, so that number matches. But then with the war starting with Iran, so I have that being the fiery furnace. Okay, I mean, it definitely is. That was 153 days after Trump announced his deal of the millennium. So it doesn't match this 190 time frame for the Lebanon explosion. So I'm not, so I'm not quite sure, if I'm missing, something to make these charts kind of match up more. But I definitely think after the fiery furnace, the war with Iran, we're going to go back to what I call the lion's den, the protest. Like I said, the civil war. Okay. And I'll show you why, because it's really prophesied in scripture. But we'll get to that. I guess I don't have those verses right here. But I wanted to talk about Leviticus 12 connected to this Iran war. Okay. Oh, I did have this other verse, because like I said, I want us to think about the war as God using it to sanctify us. And so we read about this in Romans 5. It says, and not only this, but we also exult in our tribulations, knowing that tribulation brings about perseverance, proven character, and proven character hope. Okay. So that's a picture of the sanctification process. So that's why I believe we're in tribulation. Okay, because it brings sanctification. And then, okay, so then Leviticus 12, the time frames, I think Leviticus 12 is prophesying the time frame of the Iran war. Okay, so in Leviticus 12:2 it says, when a woman gives birth and bears a male, she will be unclean for 7 days. Okay, so the 7 days could connect to. So what was interesting is the protests. Renee Good protest started on January 7th, and then if you add 7 weeks and 4 days, you get February 28th, which is when the Iran war started. And then Leviticus 12:3 says, on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. And so, so February 28th connects to the 8th day. Okay, war with Iran on February 28th, but it also connects to how Trump is the 8th king. Okay, so like kind of this prophecy of on the 8th day, like during the 8th king, we're going to see a war. Okay, and then verse 4 says, she shall remain in the blood of her purification for 33 days. She shall not touch any consecrated thing, nor enter the sanctuary until the days of her purification are completed. So see, it's got that picture of we're being purified during this war. Okay. And for a 33-day time frame. And so what was interesting is that so what I actually think is that there's two 33-day time frames. Okay. And so there was 33 days from the start of the war to Passover Eve, and then the Jewish people start counting the Omer on the second day of Passover, and so that leads us to May 4th. The 33rd day of the Omer is May 4th through the May 5th. Okay, May 4th to May 5th. And the Jewish people see the counting of the Omer. I actually have this quote here of, so when they count the Omer, they do a prayer every day. Okay, and so they're praying. They're asking God to purify us from our evil and uncleanness. And then there's also prayers to God to hear our cry and to restore the service of the Holy Temple. Okay, and so the Jewish people have been praying that every day as they count the Omer. And so they believe the 49-day Omer count is thus a 49-step process of self-refinement, is what they write about it. Okay. And so I think they might be right. And so actually, okay, so let me think. In Daniel 6, the number 33 is actually, it's kind of hidden in there, but it's in there twice, and it has to do with, like, it talks about like, I don't remember if I made a slide for this. I think I made a slide, and so you might get this information twice. So Daniel 3 and Daniel 6 are where you read about the fiery furnace and the lion's den. Okay, because I think those are the two final big events before Jesus comes. Okay, and I definitely think the fiery furnace has been this war with Iran. Okay, and then the lion's den, I think, is a picture of the civil war that's coming to America. And maybe Israel. And so I think hidden in those verses are the time frames too. Okay. I mean, we read about the 33 days and the 66 days in Leviticus 12, but it's also hidden in the story of the lion's den and the fiery furnace. And so in Daniel 6, which is a picture, is the story of the lion's den. It talks about they asked the king that if anyone prays to any god or man besides the king for 30 days to cast them into the lion's den. They were trying to get, they wanted to get rid of Daniel because, like, he was just too righteous for them. And so they came up with this thing that anyone who prays to any god or man besides the king for 30 days will be cast into the lion's den. But then right after that, it talks about how when Daniel knew that law was signed for 30 days, he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day. Okay, so you take the 30 days and the 3 times a day, and that gets you to the number 33, because that whole story is repeated again right underneath it. Okay, why is it repeated again? Because I think God's trying to show us there's 2 33-day time frames. Okay. So that's that third time frame. And then what's interesting too is that, Daniel 12 talks about the number 1335. And so one thing you could say is that 1 connects to Passover. Then you have the 33rd day of the Omer, and then the 5 could connect to May 5th. Okay, which is 5/5, by the way. Okay. So that is a possible fulfillment of 1335. Okay. And then I thought it was interesting because we see Ishmael gets circumcised at 13. Okay. Trump, and I think Ishmael is a big picture of Trump. Okay. And so what's interesting is this war started in Trump's second term on his 13-month 9th day. Okay. January 20th, 25 to 2/28/26 is 13-month 9 days. Okay. So I think that's interesting, an interesting fulfillment. Okay. So continuing in Leviticus 12, it says, but if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean for 2 weeks. Well, so I found a bunch of 2-week time frames. Okay. What's very interesting is the government shutdown started on 2/14, and then 2 weeks later plus 2 weeks is 2/27, and the war started the next day, 2/28. Okay. But if you jump from Saturday to Saturday, like 2/14 and then 2 Saturdays later is 2/28. So that's a 2-week time frame. And then there was a 2-week ceasefire on 4/7. There was 2 Easter weeks, the regular Easter and the Orthodox Easter during that time frame. And then Congress was on vacation for 2 weeks during that time frame. So I thought that was interesting. And then it says she will be in the blood of her purification for 66 days. Okay. Which would connect to the 2 times 33. Okay. So the 66th day of the shutdown in America ended on 4/20. Okay. What I thought was interesting about that is you could also take 6 plus 6 and get 12, which would be a picture of 1 year. So 1 year ago on April 20th, 2025, it was Orthodox Easter, regular Easter, and it was the 8th day of Passover, which is when they have the Moshiach Seder. Okay, like the 8th day of the Passover is when they're looking, for the end times, when they're looking for the Messiah to return. Okay, so I think that could have been a significant date. Okay, but I think there's a double fulfillment because 66 days after the war started takes us to 5/4. Okay, so that's a high watch date. And there's other reasons why 5/4 is the high watch date too. Okay. And then what did I write here? Lebanon. Oh, this was interesting too. The Lebanon ceasefire is 6 weeks, 6 days after 2/28. Okay. So you kind of see that 6/6 there. So that's interesting too. So maybe a possible other fulfillment. Okay. And then what's interesting about if you take the 2 weeks and you add it to 66, you get 80. Okay. 80 days. And then we find that Moses was 80 and Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. Okay. So 5/4/2026 is the 80th day of the shutdown. The American shutdown. But then if you take 211 when Netanyahu met with Trump, and you take that to 5-4, you get 83 days there. Okay, so the shutdown started on February 14th, and then 80 days later is 5-4. But on 211, when Netanyahu and Trump met to 5-4, it's an extra 3 days, so 83 days. Okay. Hopefully this is making sense to you. Like, I think it makes more sense if you actually look at the slide. And then what I thought was interesting, so then what happens after the woman is purified? It says Leviticus 12:6, and I highlighted 12:6 because that's a picture of 666. So it says, when the days of purification are completed, they're supposed to bring to the doorway of the tabernacle a 1-year-old lamb for a burnt offering and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. So I highlighted doorway because Jesus is the door. Okay. So a picture of like the priest at the door of the tabernacle. And then like what happens is then they're going to do a sacrifice of a burnt offering and a sin offering. Okay. Which I think is a shadow of the civil war. Okay. Okay. Daniel 9. Okay, so these are the time frames that we read about in Daniel 9. So just if you're wondering why I think it's the last days, is because these time frames are being fulfilled. So 70 years was when Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, the 70th year of Israel. But then Gabriel says, besides 70 years, because Daniel was like, hey, it's 70 years, I'm expecting something to happen right now, and Gabriel says, well, there's actually a few more time frames. And so then in 924 of Daniel, we read about the 70 weeks. Okay, so what was interesting about the Lebanon ceasefire is that was 70 weeks one day after 12/12/24. Okay, 12/12/24 was when Time magazine declared Trump their man of the year or whatever. And so I talked about that in one of my previous videos. And so I kind of think that 12/12/24 was like the start of like, Trump was voted in and he won the election, but it was like we were seeing Trump returning to power and Biden kind of losing his power. Okay, even while Biden was still in office. Okay, and that those numbers 12, 12, and 24 connect to the 666. Okay, like you see sixes all over the place. So 12 is 2 6s. So that's actually, I guess that's 8 6s, isn't it? Yeah, 6 6 6 6 plus 4 more 6s. Yeah. Oh, that would connect to Trump being the 8th king. Okay. Wow, I don't know if I caught that before. Okay, cool. Okay. And then okay, so then 5/4/26, by the way. So another fulfillment of the 70 weeks is that 5/4/26 is 70 weeks, 6 days after 12/25/24. Okay, so 12/25/24 was an important day too because it was Christmas, and it was the it was Hanukkah Eve, okay, on the Jewish calendar, but then it was also the day where the electoral votes were you needed to have them turned in by that date to Harris. Okay. So I think that date's a significant date too. Okay. A picture of like coming of Jesus. Okay. So okay, so that's another 70 week. But another thing I thought was interesting too was 5/24/26 is Pentecost. which is 50 days after Easter. That's 70 weeks after Trump's inauguration. Okay, so we read about the 70-week time frame, like putting an end to sin. Okay, so we could be seeing Pentecost being, just a purification of God's people. Okay, like so if something doesn't happen on 5/4, then we could still be looking toward 5/24. But Shavuot's also coming up too, which is May 22nd. Okay. So I guess that's actually 2 days before Pentecost. Okay, so then Daniel 9:25 says, "You are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there would be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress." So I actually found 2 time frames that connect to the so the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem could be Trump announcing his Gaza plan on 2/4/25, because he had this big plan to rebuild Gaza. Okay, the other decree could be the start of the protest on January 7th. Okay, because we're seeing these rebellious people on the left that want to rebuild America. Okay. So anyways, and so the 7-week time frame, so 7 weeks 4 days after January 7th, like I said before, was the start of the war, and then 62 weeks. Okay, so the Lebanon ceasefire is 62 weeks 3 days after 2/4/25. Okay, so that could be the fulfillment for the 62 weeks. Okay, Trump made his announcement on 2/4, and then 62 weeks later, we're seeing this Lebanon ceasefire. Okay. Then it says, so then we talked about this verse already, Daniel 9:26. After the 62 weeks, the anointed will be cut off. Israel can't fight anymore, and have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come, Prince of Greece is the prince who is to come. We see that in Daniel 10:20. Okay. And they will destroy the city and the sanctuary. I think there was already a fulfillment with Trump for this verse about the because the anointed that got cut off was Biden, and then Trump and his people have come and are destroying America. I mean, they're definitely destroying the left stuff in America. So they're definitely destroying the city and the sanctuary. And then Daniel 9:27. So this is the verse they always use for the Antichrist. That's why they think there's going to be a 7-year tribulation period, but I don't believe that that's how we're supposed to use that verse. Because actually, when it says he will make a firm covenant, we don't know who he is. Okay, and I actually think, because if you look up that word covenant, you find all the times that God made a covenant. And so I think God made a covenant with like the people on the left, that they were allowed to protest for 7 weeks before this war started. And then, because then it says, well, the way it's translated, it says, but in the middle of the week. But I think a better way to translate it says, then another half a week until the war starts. Okay, so 7 weeks after the protest, then you add another so it's 7.5 weeks till the war with Iran starts. And then it says, he will put a stop to sacrifice. Okay, so the he there could be Trump, or Israel too. Trump and Netanyahu. He will put a stop to sacrifice. Or God uses, it could still be God, because God is using Trump and Netanyahu to put a stop to Iran, who does sacrifice and grain offerings. So we have Iran wanting to kill Jews, we have Iran wanting to kill Americans. Okay, so that could be the shadows of sacrifice and grain offering. And then it says, on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate. So after the abomination of the war, the left is going to return to rebel and cause destruction. They're going to start the civil war, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. Okay. I wanted to point this out. So Netanyahu, I believe, is Michael, your prince. Even though with everything there's multiple fulfillments. Because these are the two verses connected to Michael is Daniel 10:21 and 12:1. Okay, what's interesting is 10:21 is Netanyahu's birthday, and 12:1 is when Netanyahu formed a government in 2022. So that's a pretty direct fulfillment of prophecy right there. So, in case you're wondering who Michael, your prince, is. So the guy who returns to fight against the Prince of Persia is Trump. Okay. Because he returns in his second term and starts a war with Iran. He actually had 2 wars with Iran. Or 2 different times in his second term when he attacked Iran. Okay, so I wanted to point out, okay, numbers. Okay, so what's interesting is when you see a repeat of these numbers. Okay, what's interesting is that Trump is the 47th president. Okay, but what we're also seeing is that the regime in Iran has been around for 47 years. Okay, and then if you take Pete Hegseth and count the letters in his name, that's 47. Okay, 47 was the start of the shaky ceasefire, which was also 4-8 in the Middle East. It's also interesting too, because King Charles, if you count those letters, you get 47. The Trump Tower fire was actually 4-7 in 2018. Okay. Now, okay, in order to understand why we're seeing a repeat of this number 47 is if you take 4 plus 7, it adds up to 11. Okay, the meaning of 11 is lawlessness, rebellion, disorder, and chaos. Okay. And 11 also means marking a time of change before reaching divine order. So if you want to know Trump's, God's purpose for Trump with this war is, he is using Trump to bring disorder and chaos. Okay, because, because we're going to be reaching divine order when the Messiah comes back. Okay. And then also connected to the war on 228. 228 was 1 year, 1 month, 9 days after January 20th, 2025, which is a hidden 9/11. So you see 1 year, 1 month, you see the 1/1, and then the 9 days. Okay. And then other connections with Trump and 9/11. Well, I've talked about a long time about how he was number 45 and he's number 47, which adds up to 9 and 11. Okay. In the Torah readings, the Shemini Torah reading, which means Shemini means 8th. Okay. The chapters that they read is Leviticus 9 to Leviticus 11. So God's showing us that the 8th king is going to connect to 9/11. Okay. What's interesting about 9/11 too is that we're currently in the time frame of the 119th Congress. Okay. I mean, I think 9/11 is the picture of the Civil War. Okay. I mean, it's also a picture of like Jesus on the cross with the 2 thieves. Okay, like Jesus is the 9, and then there's the 2 towers from 9/11. Okay, and the 2 towers, I think, are probably Trump and Netanyahu that fall, or it could be the left and the right in America that fall. And I think the number 48 connects to the Messiah, because 4 plus 8 add up to 12, which, there's 12 tribes of Israel. Israel was established on May 14, 1948. So yeah, that 48 number there. May 14th is 5 plus 14 adds up to 19. I think that number 19 also connects to the Messiah. Because, like, 18 connects to 666, like the mark of the beast. Okay, so then I think the Messiah follows the Antichrist, and so his number is 19. And then 1335 add up to 48 too. Okay. What's interesting too was 4/8/2024 was the Great North American Eclipse. Okay. What was interesting is the date in 2024 on 4/7, Trump put out a video, like, I don't even know why he did this, but he put out a video where he made himself like, he just has to steal all the attention from everything. And so he made a video where he was like the moon blocking the sun, which I actually think is kind of prophetical. Like, if you have the sun being the Messiah and Trump is the moon that blocks the sun. And so that actually happened on 4/7, and then we had the eclipse. The real eclipse happened on 4/8. And so it was interesting because this year there was a repeat of those dates, because on 4/7 was the ceasefire, but that was later in the day, so it was already 4/8 in Israel when the ceasefire with Iran happened. And then what did I write here too? So 4/8/2024 is like 4/8/8. And then 2/28/26 is also 4/8/8. You can get 4/8/8 out of that. Okay. So just interesting. Okay, so so I did do a slide for Daniel 6 where I show 30 days and then 3 days and then 30 days and 3 days being repeated twice. Okay. In Daniel 3 is where we find the 66 time frame. It comes from 3:1. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, the height of which was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. Okay. Daniel 10:20 I decided was like a 1-verse prophecy. Okay. Because this is Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, and he says, "Do you understand why I came to you? I shall now return to fight against the prince of Persia, so I am going forth, and behold, the prince of Greece is about to come." So what I believe is that this is a prophecy of how Trump he returns to his second term to fight with Iran. Okay, so Trump returns for his second term and fights with Iran. Also, he fights with Iran twice. And then it says, "Behold, the Prince of Greece is about to come." Prince of Greece is the shaggy goat that fights against the ram with 2 horns. And so that's either Obama or Biden or just the left in general. And then Daniel 10 goes on to verse 21 where it says, "However, I will tell you what is this inscribed in the writing of truth. Yet there is no one who stands firmly with me against these forces except Michael, your prince." That was the verse that I told you connects to Netanyahu, because 10/21 is his birthday. Okay. So it's like Trump is talking and he says, well, the only one who stands firmly with me is Netanyahu fighting against Iran. Okay. And then in Exodus 2, we also see this picture of the Iran war and the Civil War in America. Or the fiery furnace and the lion's den. Okay, and this is the story of Moses, okay, in Exodus 2. It says, "The child grew and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses and said, because I drew him out of the water." Okay, so I believe that Biden was the beast from the sea. And so then Trump was drawn out of the water, and he's actually the beast from the earth. So him and his people are connected to the earth. And then Biden and his people are connected to the sea, because he's the beast from the sea. Okay. And then it says, verse 11 says, "It came about in those days when Moses had grown up that he went out to his brethren and looked on their hard labors, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew one of his brethren. So he looked this way and that, and when he saw there was no one around, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Okay, so this is a shadow of the Iran war. Okay, because then what happens the next day, in verse 13, Moses went out the next day, and behold, two Hebrews were fighting with each other. And he said to the offender, why are you striking your companion? But he said, who made you a prince or a judge over us? Are you intending to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and said, surely the matter has become known. So the two Hebrews fighting with each other is a picture of civil war in America. And it's interesting that one of the Hebrews said, who made you a prince or a judge over us? Are you going to kill us just like you killed the Egyptian? So that would be like people in the left, like thinking, actually, what I really think this is a shadow of how the left is going to protest against, Trump wants to send troops to the Middle East, okay? And we live in a country that hates war, okay, is anti-war, okay? And, because this has been going on since the 60s, okay? That generation raised another generation that hates war, okay? And, so that could be what sparks this civil war in America, okay? Is, that they think they're going to be drafted. So anyways, but we definitely see in these verses, first the Iran war, then the Civil War. And then same thing, Jeremiah 9:11, another one verse prophecy. Because God says, I will make Jerusalem a heap of ruins, a haunt of jackals, and I will make the cities of Judah a desolation without inhabitant. Okay, so that's a picture of, like, if Jerusalem is America and Judah is Israel, so Jerusalem is going to be a haunt of jackals. They're going to be the lion's den, okay? And like, notice that this is 9/11. See, that's why I said 9/11 is the Civil War, okay? And then the cities of Judah will be a desolation. Well, they've been, during the fiery furnace, during this war with Iran, they've been a desolation. Like, people have been in the bomb shelters, not in the cities, okay? But I don't know if there's a further fulfillment, like if Israel gets nuked. I mean, it doesn't have to happen because we've already seen this fulfillment of the cities of Judah being a desolation. I mean, the only reason why I say that, well, I don't know if it's the only reason, but one of the reasons is because Lazarus gets raised from the dead by Jesus, and it could be that, Israel gets attacked. I mean, that could be what sparks this civil war in America. And then Jesus comes back and resurrects the nation of Israel. So that's a possible fulfillment, but we live partially. So we're in the times of partial prophecy, so I'm not really sure how it'll be fulfilled. We just have to wait and see. And then I wanted to talk about the 10 kings. Okay, so we saw on March 28th was the No Kings protest. Okay, 50 state nationwide protest. Oh, it says No Kings 3. So I guess, I don't know if that's been their third, that was their third protest. No thrones, no crowns, no kings. Okay. So in Revelation 17, it says, then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with me, saying, come, I'll show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters. So Minneapolis is many waters, okay? Revelation 17 connects to 1:7 when the protest started in Minneapolis, okay? And then it goes on to say, he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, so the 7 could connect again to, like, Revelation 1:7. It could connect to Biden being the 7th king. And then it says, on her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. So like Trump's followers get the 666, but maybe the people on the left get what's written on their forehead, which is really long. Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. I didn't know if it was like maybe their number was 555 connected to Obama being the fifth king. But then it says, the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction. So I told you that like originally that was Trump, came out of the abyss and went to destruction. But are we going to see a return of Biden or a return of Obama coming out of the abyss and bringing destruction to America? And those who dwell on the earth, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will wonder when they see the beast that he was and is not and will come. Okay, so then let's talk about the 10 horns. So let me see. Did I do that on here? So the beast which, okay, let me think. Okay, so Revelation goes on to say, verse 11 says, the beast which was and is not is himself also an eighth and is of the seven, and he goes to destruction. So Trump is the eighth king, and his destruction is this war with Iran. Okay, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. They have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. And the 10 horns which you saw, these will hate the harlot and make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and burn her up with fire. Okay, so one thing to think about is think of the LA riots, like how destructive those were. Okay, so I think that's a foreshadow of what we're going to see at the end of America before Messiah comes. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose and by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God will be fulfilled. And so what I believe about, okay, the 10 horns are the connect to the 10 spies in the wilderness who don't have faith. Okay, they don't trust that God can help us get the land, without having to use our own power. They don't trust God's power. Okay, there was 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, who had faith in God. Okay, but these 10 spies didn't have faith in God. Okay, so that's the 10 horns. Okay, and when you think about these, no kings protest, they don't want a king. Okay, they don't want Trump to be their king, but they also don't want God to be their king. Okay, they want to have their own authority, and so God actually allows them to have authority for 1 hour. Okay, during this civil war. Okay, and then because we read about in the Bible how we're supposed to submit ourselves to the Lord's sake, for the Lord's sake, to every human institution, whether to a king as the one in authority or to governors, sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do right. Servants are to be submissive to their masters, even if, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are unreasonable. So God doesn't say we can't. God says, regardless whether our leaders are righteous or evil, we still have to submit to them. Is what God says in his word. Okay, because God gives us wicked leaders, like, sometimes it's judgment, like, because of our sins, he gives us wicked leaders, but he always has a reason for giving us wicked leaders. Okay, a lot of it has to do with sanctification. Okay, because then it goes on and says, for this finds favor, for if for the sake of conscience toward God, a person bears up under sorrows when suffering unjustly, For what credit is there when you sin and are harshly treated, you endure it with patience? But if when you do what is right and you suffer for it, you patiently endure it, this finds favor with God. Okay, if you're bad and you suffer, you don't get any credit. Okay, but if you are right and you suffer for being righteous, God, you're going to find favor with God. Okay, because it says, for you have been called for this purpose, since Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example for to follow in his steps. Okay. And then Deuteronomy talks about, okay, so God says, you shall not do at all what we are doing here today, every man doing what is right in his own eyes. For you have not as yet come to the resting place and the inheritance which the Lord your God has given you. Okay, so in that time frame, in the time frame of the first Exodus, everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes. We are in that time frame again. Okay. And then Judges 17:6 says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. Okay. Revelation 18 talks about the 1 hour. Woe, woe, the great city Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. So that's the 1 hour that the 10 kings get authority for. Okay. So this is, so my sister did this research here for me. Thank you, sis. She Googled, what is everything that Trump is selling? Okay. This is an overview. Okay, so I want you to understand that Trump system is the Babylon system. He is the buyer and seller of scripture. Okay. And so this is a list of his merchandise ventures. Okay. So there's clothing and footwear and watches and Bibles and books and fragrances and collectibles like coins and NFTs. Remember those? Oh gosh. And actually guitars. I was shocked when I saw guitars, but I looked it up and sure enough, he's got a deal with this company. A licensing agreement with this company that they sell Trump guitars, and he signs some of them too. And he gets a kickback for all these Trump guitars that are sold. There's cryptocurrency ventures, a mobile phone service. So if you think, I remember in his first term, like he said he wasn't going to take a salary or whatever. That's all gone out the wayside. Like he is still making money all over the place. And then, okay, so Trump's merchandise sales have reportedly generated millions, and he does fundraising too and asks people for money. Don't send him your money. Okay, with estimates suggesting he made over $600 million in 1 year from these ventures. The Trump store alone has seen significant sales growth, reaching over $3 million in 2023. These activities raise ethical questions about the blending of personal profit and public office as Trump continues to capitalize on his political status. So, definitely. And then, because here's another thing that my sister pointed out, Trump fundraising email uses photo from soldiers' dignified transfer and promises private national security briefings. Okay, so fundraising email from President Donald Trump. His political action committee has a provocative pitch using an image from Saturday's. Okay, so this was in March. Okay. Dignified transfer honoring 6 fallen U.S. soldiers in the Iran war. It promises access to the president's private national security briefings. Okay, so the email promotes what it calls a national security briefing membership and urges recipients to claim your spot with multiple links to donate in what it describes as an exclusive group receiving updates about national security threats. Okay, the message includes an official White House photograph showing Trump saluting during a dignified transfer at Dover Air Force Base, a solemn military tradition honoring fallen U.S. soldiers. Trump attended alongside members of his administration. Okay. So I'll skip to the part where it says, okay, so it links to, the email links to a donation page, and it says, I am President Donald J. Trump. You're the only reason we saved America. The page reads, now I'm asking you to consider making a small sustaining contribution so we can complete the MAGA agenda. Can I count on your support? Okay, so remember, he's already spending tons of our tax dollars, and then now he wants people to donate to him. It's just disgusting. I mean, he's almost worse than some of those Christian the mega pastors that made tons of money, just really similar. Okay, the email is one of a number of pitches by Trump and his affiliated PACs that have used the war in Iran to raise money. Okay. Let's see, and he's really cavalier too about the cost of war, because they said, asked Saturday whether he thought he would have to attend more dignified transfers. Trump said, I'm sure. I hate to, but it's a part of war. I mean, he just seems a little cavalier about that. Let's see. I'm trying to find the part. I know somebody said something, they don't like it. Senator Andy Kim of New Jersey wrote on X, I hope the donor's national security briefing doesn't skip the Iran will close the Strait of Hormuz section that Trump and Hegseth missed. Okay, the fundraising email drew rebukes from some Democrats after screenshots circulated on social media. The press office for California Governor Gavin Newsom also criticized the email, writing, Donald Trump is fundraising off of dead soldiers. He is a deeply sick and disgusting man. So then I put in, this is the passage about how Jesus goes into the temple and overthrows the tables of the money changers. I mean, because I definitely think this is like Jesus comes and he's gonna get rid of the money changers, the Trump and his followers. Okay. So I want to put all this stuff in here too, because I want you to see how Trump is, the Antichrist. He's connected to Babylon. He's the buyer and the seller. Okay. And the other thing too is he wants to put his image everywhere. Okay, so remember that Jesus is humble. Okay, but Trump, he doesn't even know that God expects you to be humble. Okay. I mean, he doesn't understand that God wouldn't like Trump putting his name everywhere. Okay. So there's this gold coin with the Trump image that gets approved by the president's hand-picked panel. Okay, so the other thing you need to understand too is 666 is already happening, okay? Because Trump is picking he's firing the old people on panels and hiring his people, okay? So his hand-picked panel approved this gold coin with Trump's images. So it's always all these people that like Trump. He gets rid of the people that don't like him and he replaces them. So that's the 666 that's happening. Okay. And I have the verses coming up. So on 319 they approved the commemorative coin that's going to be 24 karat gold. There's also going to be a $1 coin for circulation that was approved in January. On 326, they approved that he's going to have his signature, Trump's signature is going to be on one of the dollar bills in June, starting in June. Okay, so I went to the Wikipedia page where it was a list of things named after Julius Caesar, okay? the Forum of, okay, one of the things that kind of reminds me of Trump was the Forum of Caesar. It was named after Caesar in 54 BC, who initiated its construction to celebrate his military triumphs and provide a space for public affairs. On completion in 46 BC, it was dedicated to Caesar and his deeds. Okay, so I definitely see a connection. Okay, let's see. Oh, this is the verses where it talks about, is it lawful for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But he detected their trickery and said to him, show me a denarius. Whose likeness and inscription does it have? They said, Caesar's. And he said, then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God. And, so I think Trump's the Caesar. Okay, Caesar had his picture on the coin. Okay. And so when it says render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, it's like, Trump's the money guy. Okay. But, give God the things that are God. Okay. So God is not about money. Okay. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyways, but I think that's a shadow, a prophecy of Trump. Okay. Okay, so the U.S. Institution of Peace renamed for Trump after his administration dismantled the agency. Okay, here's another place where, okay, so this is how Trump gets what he wants. He dismantles the agency that would vote against him, and then replaces it with his people. So the article says most of its staff were let go in March. Okay. But then the nonpartisan independent agency's mission is to promote peace internationally and resolve violent conflicts globally. Most of its staff were let go in March. Okay. So Trump's name added, see his name there, kind of hard to read, but added to the Institute of Peace building in DC. So it says no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark. Okay. So like prophets have kind of like false prophets have kind of run with this, and they came up with this whole idea of a chip. Okay. Well, did I already talk about this? I can't remember now. The mark on your right hand or your forehead. Okay, because it says he causes all, the small, the great, the rich, the poor, the free man, and the slaves to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. Okay, everybody gets a mark. The question is your mark 666, or is your mark the mark of God, or is your mark the mark of the harlot of Babylon? Okay, and we're seeing a fulfillment of the verse, no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark of the beast. Okay. Excuse me. And so we're seeing the fulfillment of that. Okay. Stop looking for literal chips. Okay. So that kind of happened, like Hal Lindsey was kind of the start of that. Like he wrote The Late Great Planet Earth, and he was kind of looking at the technology of the day and kind of reading it back into the scriptures. But then we're gonna miss that the Antichrist is here, if we're listening to like man's imaginations instead of taking the scripture and seeing if what it says and if it's being fulfilled. Okay. And so what we're seeing is that in Trump's, so I don't know how Trump gets involved in all these different organizations, but like the Institute of Peace, where does he have the power to go and dismantle the agency and put his people in? So somehow he's able to know, he's able to know who will vote for him, and he's able to put them in power or on these boards or whatever. So they're the ones that are able to buy and sell, the ones who have his name or his number. Okay. And then, okay, so then I wanted to show you what Marco Rubio said about this. Okay, so he said, President Trump will be remembered by history as the president of peace. It's time our State Department display that. Okay, and then the Department of State said, this morning the State Department renamed the former Institute of Peace to reflect the greatest deal maker in our nation's history. Welcome to the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace. The best is yet to come. Okay. Okay, so then I threw in these verses. These people are delusional, okay? It says, then that lawless one will be revealed. The one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, without power, signs, false wonders, okay, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. For this reason, God will send upon them a deluding influence so that they will believe what is false. But God says, so then, brethren, stand firm and hold to the traditions which you were taught. So Rubio, delusional, okay. The president of peace, okay. Donald Trump was the one who started the war with Iran, okay. So they're just delusional, and like it's amazing how much these people just like totally overhype Trump and make him out to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. So that's the deluding influence, okay. But just so the people on left don't get proud, okay, I do think there's a deluding influence happening on the left side too, okay, because we need to be aware of the Muslims' propaganda campaign in America, okay. That included anti-Semitism. The Muslims found the left in this country susceptible, especially in universities, for their propaganda campaign, okay. And then this is a whole nother teaching, okay, but I'm just kind of doing a quick overview. Okay, so on the left there's the lies about occupiers, Israel being an occupier, America being an occupier. They make Palestinians the innocent victims and Israel the aggressor. They say, okay, so I grew up hearing Islam is a peaceful religion. That's a lie. There's the genocide lie. They say that, they lie that and say that Israel is causing a genocide in Gaza when there's been more babies born there than, probably anywhere else. And then there's now the use of social media to spread lies about this war in Iran. So just a real quick overview. More stuff about Trump. Trump rails against court decision that once again stalls his White House ballroom project. Okay, so on March 29th, Trump confirms that the military is building, with U.S. tax dollars, a massive complex under the White House ballroom. I think it will be the greatest ballroom anywhere in the world. Okay, on 3/31, the judge grants an injunction request by the National Trust for Historic Preservation blocking construction. But then on 4/9, this picture here, we see construction still going on. So then on 4/16, the judge said he'll allow the below ground work, which is this, it's a bunker that they're building underneath the ballroom, but not the above ground work. But then on 4/18, an appeals court is allowing all the White House construction to resume. So I'm not really sure where it stands right now, because it seemed like Trump was complaining that they were trying to stop, so I don't know if something happened and I missed, after 4/18, because I just heard after 4/18 Trump complaining that they were trying to stop him from building this ballroom. And then now with the, assassination attempt, he's got even more of a bee in his bonnet to get this ballroom built, saying, like he's really wanting the bunker underneath. And what's interesting is that the ballroom wouldn't hold. The ballroom's only supposed to hold 999 people. The correspondence dinner was like 2,500 or something like that. So it wouldn't even hold the same number of people. I'm not sure how I feel about my president spending all his time having steak and lobster dinners with people. And so, I mean, because with the correspondence dinner, they said they had to like freeze all the steak and the lobsters, and I guess they donated it to like battered wives shelters or something like that. So that's our tax dollars at work. And so now Congress is actually talking about trying to pass a bill to fund. Okay, so remember Trump promised that this ballroom wouldn't use American tax dollars. Well, now they're trying to pass a bill to use American tax dollars to build this ballroom. So, I mean, I just think this is a tragedy. So, so I put the quote in Daniel 12 that says, "But as for you, Daniel, conceal these words and seal up the book until the end of time. Many will go back and forth and knowledge will increase." So I highlighted many will go back and forth. So under Trump, we've been going back and forth. It's like, first he's building the ballroom. He's not building the ballroom. He's building it again. He's not building, and it was the same way with the war. It's like, we're at a ceasefire. No, we're not at a ceasefire. The Strait of Hormuz is open. No, it's not open. So just in these last days, it's just crazy making time back and forth. You just don't know where you stand. And then I put in the verse 2 from Daniel 7 about the horn, a little one came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boast. Okay, so I highlighted Trump saying, I think it'll be the greatest ballroom anywhere in the world. So definitely he's the boast guy. Okay. And the horn too, so it says it possesses eyes like the eyes of a man. Okay. So that connects this horn to the 2 witnesses. Okay. Eyes connect to the 2 witnesses. And then it says 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. I think the 3 horns connect to the 3 branches of the U.S. government, because Trump is no longer living under that system. It's like Trump is just making the decisions for everything. Okay, it's no longer a system of check and balances. And then on March 30th, Trump shared his renderings of a towering presidential library that he wants to build in Miami, Florida. Also, Florida governor, on March 30th, the same day, Governor DeSantis signs a bill to rename Palm Beach International Airport to President Donald J. Trump International Airport. That's supposed to happen in July. Trump said his presidential library on 331 would most likely be a hotel. So, I was worried that he was going to turn Washington, D.C. into Trumpville. But, I mean, it's just spreading farther than that. And, I mean, this tower. Okay, so... Okay, it says the Trump Presidential Library will be one of the most magnificent buildings in the world and a living testament to the indelible impact President Trump has made on America and its people, White House spokesperson David Engel said in a statement. Eric Trump touted the renderings on X Monday night, 3:30. The landmark on the water in Miami, Florida, will stand as a lasting testament to an amazing man, an amazing developer, and the greatest president our nation has ever known. Okay, so remember diluting influence these people have? Okay. And so then this is a picture of in the presidential library. Okay, so Trump apparently didn't get the word that God doesn't like golden statues. Okay. In Daniel 3, we read about Nebuchadnezzar making an image of gold. Okay, the height of which was 60 cubits by 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Okay. Um, um, so Daniel 3, I highlighted 3 because it connects to March, which is when we heard about this library. So there's supposed to be this room that you walk in, and there's this big giant gold statue with Trump in there. Okay. Besides his picture being reflected on the wall. And so how you know Trump connects to Nebuchadnezzar, who made this image of gold. Okay, so this is all the golden stuff that's supposed to be in this library. A gold statue of Trump, gold lettering in the library, the golden escalator, that connects to when he first made his announcement that he was going to run for president. The golden arch at the entrance, and the gilded Oval Office reconstruction. Okay. Anyways, okay, then there's his plan for the triumphal arch. Okay. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, his name is not on it, but I guess I saw another article where it's actually supposed to be called the Trump of Art, the Arch of Trump, the Archday Trump, or something like that. So here, once again, okay, President Donald Trump's planned triumphal arch for Washington cleared a key hurdle Thursday after its early design secured approval from a federal arts panel whose members were handpicked by the president. This is how you get things done. You put all your people in there that will vote for you. The Commission of Fine Arts, which has a new slate after Trump fired the previous members last year, vets designs and major architectural projects in the nation's capital. It does not have the final say or construction of the proposed arc. Okay, so you can't buy or sell if he fires you. Trump has proposed building a towering 250-foot triumphal arch. So this would be another type of tower, okay, that Trump wants to build. It would be twice as tall as the Lincoln Memorial and nearly as tall as the Capitol. I mean, it's funny because you see the Capitol here and the I don't think these are to scale, but it's just hilarious how this arch is like huge, and then the Washington Memorial is this tiny little thing, and Congress is this tiny little thing. Okay, so this is the same picture. Okay, so public comments on the proposal show widespread opposition to the project, with some saying it would have a negative impact on the path between the Lincoln Memorial and Arlington National Cemetery, where the arch is expected to be built. Trump's arch would feature eagles, Lady Liberty, and a line from the Pledge of Allegiance. Renderings obtained by NBC News last week showed. The commission secretary said the panel received about 1,000 comments on the proposal that were 100% against the project. James McQuarrie, the architect of Trump's proposed White House ballroom, before leaving the project over his opposition to its size, pushed back on the arch's proposed height at the hearing. McQuarrie suggested that they remove 3 statues atop the arch, which add 84 feet to its height. Then he said the removal would make the arch a more Washingtonian design. He also suggested that Charbonneau and Trump propose alternatives for 4 planned gold lion statues, noting that lions are not native to North America. The arch has already faced legal challenges after veterans and historians sued the administration over the proposal, arguing congressional approval is needed for construction. How many times have we heard that with Trump's ideas? That lawsuit is ongoing. Asked last year whom the proposed arch would be for, Trump told reporters, me. The arch joins a growing list of architectural projects Trump has taken on during his second term, reshaping Washington's landscape. Some of those other projects have also hit legal roadblocks. A federal judge on Thursday issued a new order halting above ground construction of Trump's White House ballroom, while the Kennedy Center is facing a lawsuit over the renaming of the venue by a Trump appointed board, 666, to they can't buy or sell. Only Trump decides who buys or sell. I mean, so the same thing too we're seeing with Iran, with Trump blocking the Strait of Hormuz. He's controlling whether Iran could buy or sell. Okay. Just another example. So the Kennedy Center renamed. Okay. Trump has also suggested painting the Eisenhower executive. This guy has his hands in everything. It's very annoying. Trump has also suggested painting the Eisenhower executive office building white in a change to its classic stone facade, and building National Garden of American Heroes on the banks of the Potomac. And then he's also been talking about making changes to the reflecting pool in between the Washington and Lincoln memorials. Okay. So I'm baffled. Okay, so this is me saying I am baffled that John Hallard is baffled by Trump wanting to build this arch. Okay, so Genesis 11, it says it came about as they journeyed east. Okay, that's a metaphor for the right. Okay, Trump on the right. They found a plain in the land of Shinar, which is like also Babylon, and settled there. They said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn thoroughly. Okay, so burning any opposition. So bricks would be a picture of something, it would be people that all look like each other. Okay, whereas, we're living stones. Okay, God has, makes us living stones. We're different. We all don't all look the same. Okay, and so these people, they use brick for stone. They didn't use living stones, and they use tar for mortar. Okay, this is a shadow of what Trump's doing. Okay, they said, come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven. Okay, so look at this library. Let's see. Oh, I didn't realize there were so many. Okay, right here. This is definitely a tower that reaches into heaven. Okay. So let's get back here. Okay, and let us make for ourselves a name, otherwise we'll be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. Okay, so what did God do with these people? The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Okay. So Trump's the tower guy. Okay, and what does God think of towers that reach into heaven? I mean, it's like you're trying to get into heaven without the Messiah. Okay. So I mean, Trump just does all this bad stuff. We could take forever talking about all the bad stuff that he does. Easter 2026. So this is what happened during Easter season this year. On 4/1, Paula White Cain. I put her name Cain because that connects to the Cain and Abel story. I think that's significant. Compares Trump to Jesus at Easter lunch at the White House. On Easter Sunday 4/5, Trump had an expletive-laden message threatening to bomb Iran's power plants and bridges if they don't open the Strait of Hormuz. He said, praise be to, I'm not going to say the name because we're not supposed to say the name of other people's gods. Okay, so that was kind of a bizarre post to do on Easter Sunday. And then on Orthodox Easter, on 4/12, Trump criticized Pope Leo, and really started kind of like a week or more of feuding between him and Pope Leo. And then he posted, and after that, he posted an image of himself as a Christ-like figure. He ended up offending both Catholics and Protestants in one day. Anyways, I didn't put that picture in here either. I put this picture of Jesus. Okay. Oh, so the thing about Trump's picture, so he got flack for putting this picture and said, no, it's supposed to be me as the doctor. So either we have this crazy president who thinks he's Jesus, or we have a crazy president who doesn't know what Jesus or a doctor looks like. So take your pick. Either one is not good. Okay, so Paula White compared Trump to Jesus at the Eastern lunch. And so I wrote, Trump is the Antichrist. Okay, so one of the ways to look at the Antichrist is someone who's in place of Christ. Okay, so people making Trump their Messiah rather than the true Messiah. Okay. He's taking the place of Jesus. Okay. And then this picture with Trump fighting Pope Leo, it's a picture of the Civil War. Okay. Because I would definitely think Pope Leo is kind of representing the left. Okay. Okay, so here's what I wrote about the Antichrist in Wikipedia. Okay, they say in Christian eschatology, Antichrist, or in broader eschatology, anti-Messiah, refers to a kind of entity prophesied by the Bible to oppose Jesus Christ and falsely substitute himself as a savior in Christ's place before the second coming. Jesus alerts his disciples not to be deceived by the false prophets who will claim themselves to be the Christ, performing great signs and wonders. So you have to know that any of the progress that Israel and America made in Iran is because God allowed them, to make progress. Okay. And any of these great signs that Trump supposedly does, some of them aren't great signs, but the things that he is able to accomplish, it's because God allowed it to happen. Okay. It's a big test. Okay. Are you going to believe Trump and stop following Jesus, or are you going to hang in there and wait for the true Messiah to show up? Okay. Anyways, okay. So what is this? Okay. So I put in the story about, so this is Samuel and Saul. Okay. So God told Samuel to anoint Saul as king over his people. And then God said, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he set himself against him on the way while he was coming up from Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and utterly destroy all that he has, and do not spare him, but put to death both man and woman. Okay, so Saul was supposed to go destroy Amalek, but they spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and all that was good, and were not willing to destroy them utterly. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel, saying, I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me, and has not carried out my commands. And it was told Samuel, saying, Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he set up a monument for himself. This is so, Trump is so fulfilling the prophecy of Saul. Okay. And then, I won't read the whole story, but Saul says to him, why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord, but rushed upon the spoil and did what was evil in the sight of the Lord? Because Trump, his motivation is the money. And the reason why he went to war with Iran is because he wants to complete his Abraham Accords. He wants Saudi Arabia to join the Abrahamic Accords. Anyways, so he rushed upon the spoils. Okay, and then remember last time, I just wanted to refresh your memory. Remember, he puts up, there's a couple banners in DC with Trump's face. This is a great slide because it's Trump, making his Gaza announcement on 2:4, which connects his Second Thessalonians 2:4, where it says he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. And then, okay, so remember that Trump was holding millions of dollars from the Venezuelan oil sales in a Qatari bank. The first sale of Venezuela oil was on January 14th. On 4/19, Iranian flag Tauska, which was a cargo ship, was boarded and seized by the U.S. forces. Trump said in a post on the Truth Social platform that the Tauska was under U.S. sanctions due to its prior history of illegal activity, adding that U.S. forces were seen. What's on board? Okay, this guy Schuster said it can be treated as spoils of war. Okay, so Trump's all about the spoils of war. And then I made a list of it was kind of interesting. A bunch of stuff happened on February 17th. Okay, that was the Ring of Fire solar eclipse. Asteroid White Rabbit. It was 1 year after Delta 4819 flips over. 1335 after Roe v. Wade overturned. Mardi Gras started Ramadan Lunar New Year. That was when they had Oklahoma and Kansas fires. Colorado avalanche where 9 people died. Colorado dust storm, 4 people died. The Renee Good Memorial was set on fire. An 18-year-old rushed the Capitol with a loaded shotgun. Jesse Jackson died at 84. There was a meeting with Iran. Meeting with Ukraine and Russia for 2 days started on that day. So I actually thought we were going to see something happen on February 17th. Well, okay, that's kind of dumb. Like, a lot of stuff did happen, but it wasn't the ultimate, like return of the Messiah, the start of the Civil War and the return of the Messiah. But I think that February 17th is pointing to, it's pointing to the second month, the 17th day on the Hebrew calendar, which is 5/4, is what I'm thinking and what I'm wondering. Okay, so last year, see this, I think this is so prophetical, was we had Delta Flight 4819. Remember I said 48 connects to the Messiah, the number 19 connects to the Messiah too. It left the Minneapolis airport, which is kind of interesting. And it landed in Toronto at 2:45. We got that 45 number, which connects to Trump. Oh, but if you add 45 and 2 together, you get 47. All 80 people survived, so that connects to Trump being the 8th king. But what was interesting about it is that it lost its right wing and tail and flipped over. Okay, and there was a bunch of fire and snow. So it was a great picture of like just a reversal of fortunes. Okay, like what's up is going to be down, and what's down is going to be up. Like what the first shall be last and the last shall be first. So that was on February 17th too. Okay, so definitely a picture of but but like I said, I think all the February 17th things are pointing to the second month, 17th day on the Hebrew calendar, which is 5/4. The second month, 17th day is the Great Flood. We read about that in Genesis 7:11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on the same day all the fountains of the great deep burst open and the floodgates of the sky were opened. Okay, so I'm really waiting to see what happens this year on 5/4. And so in my last video, I thought, like I said, I thought something was going to happen on 2/17 because I thought it was like 1 year of Trump. Because in Genesis 17, we read about Ishmael. Abraham says, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." And so Trump is Ishmael. He's a wild donkey. His hand against everyone. But God says, so see, I highlighted 19. That's Jesus's number. God says, no, but Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. And he says, my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this season next year. And so that's why I was thinking it was like 1 year after February 17th, but I apparently got my season wrong. Okay. But what we have on May 4th is it's the 470th day of Trump. Okay, there's that 47 number again. Okay. May 4th is the second month, 17th day on the Hebrew calendar. It's the third day of the second Passover. 1 year after the third day of Trump in the Middle East. Okay. So actually the 1 year time frame, I guess we're counting from when Trump was in the Middle East. Okay. So last year Trump was in the Middle East on May 13th, 14th, and 15th, which was IR 15th to 17th on the Hebrew calendar. This year those dates fall on May 2nd to the 4th. So I guess that's a little bit of shortening the time. Okay, so I'm wondering if May 2nd to 4th are the 3 days of darkness. But we already can see that the fulfillment of the 3 days of darkness would be Trump in the Middle East for these 3 days. Okay, making economic, what do you call those things? Economic deals with, I mean, really some of Israel's enemies. So, because Qatar was one of those people. Okay. So anyways, and I think I already talked about this. Yeah, I already talked about Pentecost being 70-week time frame. So I wanted to tell you that there's going to be, okay, so in the scriptures it talks about there's pictures of 2 Passovers and 2 Purims. Okay, because what's interesting is that Haman was killed on Purim. And Haman and his 10 sons were killed, but then it's weird because it talks about them being hung on a second day. And it's like, it doesn't make sense. Didn't you already kill them on the first day? But see, that's a shadow of how there's 2 Purims kind of in prophecy. Okay, there's 2, I mean, the whole book of Purim too talks about 2 Purims, or 2 days connected to Purim. And so what we have is the leaders of Iran were killed on February 28th. That was a type of Purim, okay, because Haman gets killed. Okay, the leader of Iran was killed, plus a bunch of other, leaders connected to him. But in Matthew 10:28, we read about, so it's interesting that verse is verse number 28. I think that's very interesting. It says, do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul. Okay, so we don't need to be afraid of the people in Iran who are trying to kill us and kill the people in Israel. But we're supposed to rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Okay, so who we want to fear is the Antichrist. Okay, so Trump that will cause you to get the wrong mark. That's who you need to be afraid of, not someone who's going to kill your body. So that's the true Haman that we need to be afraid of. Okay, or that we really need Jesus to come deal with. Okay, so that's why I said there's a second Purim. So the first Haman, who only kills your body, the leaders of Iran got killed on February 28th, but there's going to be a second Purim where the true Haman gets dealt with. Okay. In Revelation 13, it says, and he causes all, okay, so we already talked about this, the mark of the beast. Everybody gets a mark, so it just depends on which mark you're going to get. And then you won't be able to buy or sell if you don't have Trump's mark. You won't be able to participate in his Babylon system if you don't have his mark. Anyways, but I wrote, which Purim will you celebrate? Okay, because there's some people that celebrate on the 14th, and then there's some people that celebrate on the 15th. Okay, and so I think that's a picture of like, okay, either you're celebrating, like Trump being your Messiah, killing your Haman, or you're celebrating Messiah who kills the true Haman. Okay, and then Trump's correspondence dinner is the writing on the wall story, the Daniel 5 story. Okay, because April 25th, so 25 connects to 5 times 5. Okay, and Belshazzar the king held a great feast for 1,000 of his nobles. So Trump had a little bit more than 1,000. And he was drinking wine in the presence of the 1,000. Okay, so they say that Trump doesn't drink. Okay, but there was definitely alcoholic beverages for everybody else. But also drinking wine is a picture of like drinking. Okay, so wine is also a picture of like judgment. And then, okay, so they drank the wine and praised the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Suddenly, the fingers of a man's hand emerged and began writing opposite the lampstand. Okay, so there's a whole teaching about how the lampstand connects to the left and the table of showbread connects to the right, because there's 6 loaves plus 6 loaves on the table of showbread. And so, anyways, so the writing, okay, the finger of a man's hand emerged and began writing opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the back of the hand that did the writing. Then the king's face grew pale, and his thoughts alarmed him. And his hip joints went slack, and his knees began knocking together. The queen entered the banquet hall because of the words of the king and his nobles. The queen spoke and said, "O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts alarm you or your face be pale." Okay, so the shooter is definitely opposite, Trump's politics. Okay, this guy's a guy on the left. Okay, because like he went to a No Kings protest. His last name, Allen, is 5 letters. Okay. His writing that we see that talks about him kind of being opposite of Trump is his manifesto. Okay. The back of the hand. Okay, so a hand has 5 fingers, so you get the number 5 connected to the hand. Okay. So why is 5 important? So like I said, Allen, his last name is 5 letters. 5 also connects to Obama, the 5th king. Okay. And then like I said, it connects to April 25th is 25 is 5 times 5. And then it talks about his knees began knocking together, his hip joints went slack. We saw Trump having to crawl out of the ballroom. The queen entered the banquet hall, so that's like Congress wanting to have a vote to fund the ballroom. Okay, so what Daniel says to Belshazzar, he says, "Yet you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, even though you knew all this." Like, Trump should actually be humbled, because if he knew what happened to Biden because of Biden's sins, and Trump has done similar things, then he should have recognized that Biden lost his power because of the sins that Biden connected. Because Biden wasn't even able to run for re-election. But Daniel says to Belshazzar, "Yet you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart." Okay, do you think there's any humility in Trump's heart? I don't think so. Did you see that big tall tower that's supposed to have his name on the top of it? It says, "Yet you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, even though you knew all this. But you have exalted yourself against the Lord of heaven, and have brought the vessels of his house before you. And you and your nobles, your wives and your concubines have been drinking wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see, hear, or understand. But the God in whose hand are your life, breath, and all your ways you have not glorified. Then the hand was sent from him, and this inscription was written out. Now this is the inscription that was written out. Mene, mene, tekel upharsin. This is the interpretation of the message. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and put an end to it. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found deficient. Paris, your kingdom has been divided and given over to the Medes and the Persians. So the writing on the wall, the message that God is trying to tell Trump is, one, he needs to repent. He needs to humble his heart. But two, if he doesn't, Trump's kingdom is going to be divided and given over to the Medes and Persians. There's going to be a civil war, okay? If he doesn't repent. So there's more teachings that you can get into about the scales, etc. I mean, the scales connect to, like, okay, the two witnesses, but also the buying and the selling. It's the economy, the horse with the rider with the scales, which all connects to Trump and his Babylon system. And so what's interesting is that Jimmy Kimmel's joke was somewhat prophetical, okay? Like about Melania could be a widow very soon. And actually, I think there's some prophecy that's really similar to that joke that Jimmy Kimmel made. But I didn't have time to look for it. And I forgot too, I wanted to talk about, okay, so, and we're going to have 2 Passovers too. And, this May time frame that I talk about is the second Passover that we read about in scriptures. One of the things in Passover is that you eat unleavened bread. And so unleavened bread is like this flat bread. There's no leavening. It doesn't rise. It has lines and burnt marks, like kind of a picture of suffering. Okay, so the unleavened bread is a picture of Jesus, okay, our Messiah who suffered. And then bread with leavening is a picture of Trump, who's like puffed up and, like proud and, so, that's one of the big differences between Trump and Jesus. And the Bible says, don't go either left or right. So you shall observe to do just as the Lord your God has commanded you. Don't turn to the right or the left. Okay. And have faith that God has a plan. And so you don't need to go out there protesting. Okay. Because God's got it under control. We see this happening left versus right, okay, and there arose also a dispute among them as to which one of them was regarded to be the greatest. Okay, we already saw that dispute between Trump and the Pope, but then there's, been this dispute between Trump and like Jimmy Kimmel. So Trump is constantly fighting with people on the left, okay? And then if you watch any of the videos, the left thinks they're right and they're great, and the right thinks they're right and they're great. The left thinks they're the righteous ones, the right thinks they're the righteous ones, okay? But you're not supposed to be either on the left or the right. So you're supposed to be in the middle, dry land with Messiah. Okay, so remember, verse 19 of Revelation 16 says the great city America is split into 3 parts. Okay. So that's my video. There's so much information. I'm sorry this was so long, but this is really important information. So hopefully you're seeing, I wanted to put some videos in here about the humility of Jesus. Like he was humble. He didn't consider himself what is that verse about? He didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped. But we see Trump like, really just seeing himself as like godlike and wanting to put his name on everything. So that would be a whole nother teaching, which wish I had time to bring in those verses, but that would be helpful. So I thought there was something else about the mark that I was gonna say. Can't remember. There was something else that I've forgotten now. Anyways, there's so much to say. Paul in his writings talks about time that there's not time to talk about all these other shadows that I could be telling you about. And so I kind of feel the same way. There's like so many different things I could be talking about and how they connect to the Bible. But there just isn't time. Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's any last words that I wanted to say. So I mean, one thing I could say, I wrote this down, is so the Bible talks about you will have tribulation, or Jesus actually says you will have tribulation, and Trump says you will have nothing but winning. So definitely a different theology that Trump has. So anyways, so hopefully you're starting to see that Trump is the Messiah. Sorry, not the Messiah, the Antichrist, and that which means that, and hopefully you're seeing that we're in the last days and like fulfilling a lot of the prophecies in the Bible about the last days. And hopefully you can see that Jesus is right at the door, and we're going to see him really soon. And hopefully you have enough faith to wait for Jesus instead of, making a false Messiah out of Trump. So, or a false Messiah about, John says in the last days there'll be many antichrists. And, so Obama's an antichrist figure, Biden's an antichrist figure, the Pope's an antichrist figure. I feel like there's someone else that I'm forgetting that I thought Trump was fighting with recently. It's kind of interesting that we've had King Charles came to town. And so I think we're fulfilling Esther. So Esther has her 2 banquets, but in between the 2 banquets, Mordecai gets, he has kind of like a parade through town or whatever. They honor Mordecai. And so, I think Passover 1 could be a picture of Esther's first banquet, and then the second banquet could be a picture of the second Passover. And then in between, so in between those time frames, we saw King Charles came to America and they gave him a parade and, whatever dinners and, they honored him, and so it's kind of interesting too, because they were standing at the podium with the golden eagle. Okay. And so how the wings of the 2 eagle were given to the woman and she flies into the wilderness to her place. So I think like the 2 wings of the eagle connects to the left and the right in America. And but it does kind of like, there's left and the right in the world too. Okay. And so it's interesting because I definitely think did I say Prince Charles? Well, King Charles is definitely on the left, and then Trump's on the right. So it's kind of interesting to have them both standing at this podium that had an eagle on it, so definitely a picture of like the 2 wings connecting the left and the right. Anyways, all right, so that's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you listening. So hopefully I made sense. So it's so much information, and it's really hard to keep on top of. So, anyways, and hopefully you're hanging in there during the birth pangs. So just look to the heavens where your help comes from. And I pray for God's grace for you to hang in there until the Messiah comes. So God bless. Thanks for listening.